Welcome to episode 2 of the Gluttons For Punishment podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening, and if you're watching us on YouTube as well. The Leafs have started the season with a, let's call it, solid 2-1 record over the first 3 games, and we're going to go over the week that was and give you our thoughts and opinions on everything that transpired with this team. But first, Lepore, how's it going, man?
It's going well, man. Finally have some hockey to watch. It's a Sunday morning, lots to talk about. For those of you listening, not watching on YouTube, Anthony Bruno's hair is absolute perfection right now. I'd like to see what this guy looks like when it's not a pandemic. I'm sitting here looking like a schlub. This guy's fit for a runway. But again, being from Woodbridge, Ontario, none of us are surprised.
Lepore, it's a pretty good hair day. I mean, I'm glad that you pointed that out.
You crushed it, bro.
The flow came out good today. You know, I'm getting ready for the podcast. I can't come on here looking like, total crap. I got to make sure I'm looking sharp. But Lepore, I mean, don't sell yourself short here. I mean, look at you. For those watching on YouTube, have you seen Michael Lepore?
This is a joke.
I mean, this dude is just an absolute stud. But Lepore, now let's talk about this team, okay? I know you have some fire thoughts, okay, that are coming this episode. I know that you're probably ready to drop the hammer on this team, even though they are 2-1.
Definitely.
Let's just go over the week that was, okay? I'm going to just give a little description of what happened. So game 1, the Leafs were down by 2 against the Montreal Canadiens, came back for a 5-4 overtime win, okay? Game 2, on the road against the Senators, in a game that weirdly the Senators kind of didn't really have control of. They somehow beat the Leafs 5-3. The Leafs fell asleep in the second period. They allowed 3 goals in a 5-minute span. But then the next night they bounced back, probably their best game of the season, beating the Senators 3-2 in a game that the Leafs, pretty much dominated throughout. The Sens applied some pressure late. But at the end of the week, the Leafs are 2-1. So Lepore, what are your overall thoughts on how the team played this week? I got to hear your assessment.
I think it would be impossible to look at the first 3 games of the season for the Leafs and say I'm happy. And I think all Leafs fans would be sitting together on that one. At the end of the day, Bruno, what have we seen from this team in the first 3 games that are not things that scared the shit out of us last year? We haven't learned anything. What I've seen from the first 3 games, and again, it's only the first 3 games, we have a small sample size, is that there is no progression. 0. Like, well, what do you think you saw from those 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I saw a lot of the same things I saw from last season, and some things I like. The power play I thought was good, and that I believe is carried over from last season. Last season they were the number 2 power play in the league under Sheldon Keefe. And we'll get to the whole, what they're doing with the top power play unit and things like that. I think that's positive. Defensively, especially in that game against the Senators, the first game, there was some defensive breakdowns. But just in terms of the overall style of play, they're still trying to, play that aggressive puck control, have the defenseman jump in the offensive zone, be aggressive sort of style. And I know that Sheldon Keefe wants this team to have, better attention to detail and be more structured. And yes, we did see some of those things, especially in the third game against the Senators on Saturday night. But it's like you said, I'm not really seeing any real stark differences from the way this team is playing so far.
No, man. The thing that jumped out to me from the first week of the season is that we all know who the favorites are. Like, I think everyone would point to Tampa Bay because they have the belt, and Colorado because they're just fantastic and they're the Vegas favorite to win the whole thing. And you look at Tampa Bay's first game and they absolutely smashed the Blackhawks. Okay. Then they played them again and you're thinking, oh, they might take them lightly, this and that. A team's going to come out hard the second time they play them. No, they beat them again. No doubt about it. They beat them again. Then you look at Colorado, where Colorado plays their first game against the Blues and gets slapped in the face. So then you don't know what to expect the second night. And they play the Blues again and put up a touchdown and a 2-point conversion and embarrass them 8-0. So these are the teams I look at, and they gave responses and they showed up in a way that we hope the Leafs will show up. And I hate to be that guy that like, oh, where's that killer instinct, or where's that ability to put the nail in the coffin and just humiliate your opponent and put the foot on the throat. But the Leafs haven't done that so far. So like we're all sitting here hoping that they're going to be in that tier of teams. And we were hoping to see that, and we did not. And that's where I am right now as a fan, kind of putting my hands up in the air with concern, because we want to see progression. We want to see steps forward. We want to call ourselves a contending team, but we're not showing those traits. And again, it's only been 3 games, but they're not kids anymore. The Toronto Maple Leafs are no longer cute. These guys are now in their real contracts. We added additions that are vets. Andersen is on the last year of his deal. And here's this team doing the same things and showing us the same things that are slapping us in the face, telling us that they are not where we hope they are, or they should be, is what I should say.
Well, I'll say this. I liked the response in the third game coming off the 5-3 loss to the Senators. I like how they were able to bounce back, and I actually like the way they played. But when it comes to that killer instinct that you're talking about, it wasn't really there in that Senators game, because, you know, they go up 3-1 and you just want them to put the game away. Go up 4-1.
Exactly.
Maybe even score a 5th goal, right?
Exactly.
But
humiliate them.
Exactly. And especially against a team like Ottawa. Listen, before the season, I thought they were going to finish dead last in the Canadian division. I still think they're going to finish dead last in the Canadian division, despite all the things they've done in the offseason, all the great young players they have. I still don't think they're ready. That's a team you have to punish. And to see how Ottawa was able to stay in that game late, and how it actually got a little bit concerning.
Oh man, we were all nervous. We were all nervous. Come on.
Yeah, I was like watching late in that third period. You're like, oh my dear God, if this team blows this game, if this goes to overtime, I mean, we're going to have some problems here. Because that's just a team. You don't play around. Just put them away.
I know it sounds so simplistic, but like that's what we want. Like that's what we're aching for in Leafland. Like I said before, put the foot on the throat, end it, and like we can point to the shot totals and the attempts on net. Like I think they were like Toronto had something like 70 attempts on net. But wait, I'll ask you, when you were watching that game, did it feel like we were absolutely dominating? Like we had the puck, but like when the Leafs are playing the Sens, I expect them to have the puck. But it's not like Murray stood on his head. Like, I don't remember any like crazy saves or these crazy scoring chances that he was robbing us. I don't know. What did you think on that end?
Here's my whole take on it. I've, especially the first 2 games against Ottawa, I have noticed that the Leafs controlled the majority of the play.
Right.
You know, even losing 5-3 on Friday night, I thought the Leafs controlled that, you know, most of that game. And even after the game, you hear Matthews and Tavares talk, and they were frustrated. But they said we had the puck in their end, you know, almost the entire game, right? And it seemed like Ottawa, the goals that they were scoring were just sort of, you know, plays in front of the net.
Yeah.
You know,
well, one was a fluke and one was amazing.
Front.
Yeah.
You know, there was a couple good goals that the Senators scored. I don't want to take anything, you know, away from them, from what they've done the first 2 games. But with the Leafs, I'm almost getting tired of this whole, yes, we have the puck the whole game. We're in the offensive zone, but at some point, that has to show up on the scoreboard.
Oh my God. Thank you.
At some point you need to produce, you need to start putting goals on the board, because yes, I love when they have the puck, because again, this is how this team is built, right? Control the puck, be aggressive in the offensive zone, put as much pressure as possible on the other team. That is what the Leafs do. Okay. They're not a well-structured defensive team. They're not like the Dallas Stars from last season. They're not like Barry Trotz's New York Islanders. Now, maybe they're trying to progress towards that. I don't know if they necessarily have the personnel to do that, but the way this team is built, it's that aggressive puck control offensive style. But at some point, Lepore, you have to score some damn goals.
Exactly. Like I think
that's
again,
what it comes down to.
I think again, I'm sitting where a lot of Leafs fans are sitting saying, I'm tired of hearing about the advanced stats. Show me. Like I'm tired of hearing that like, oh, their XG rate was this and the attempts on net were this and they're getting unlucky and this and that. No, now it's time for results. Like it gets to a point of sample size where I've seen enough. Like it's gotta even out. It's the puck's gotta go in. And like little details, man. And again, I hate to point to these things, like back to things that haven't shocked us. Montreal scored first. Surprise. Like opening night in Toronto, Montreal scores first. And even that game, man, like we were all excited. Toronto got the win in OT. Great pass by Tavares, but Toronto was fucking lucky in that game, man. Like we get those two power plays the end of the second to tie the game again. We're trailing. Here we are trailing at home by 2 goals against Montreal, 2 power play goals. And then the goal that tied it in the third period was bullshit. Like it goes off the referee, ends up in front of the net, and we tie it. I mean, it wasn't like, ooh, a great win. The Leafs looked amazing. It was a typical Leafs win in the way that they got into a track meet and they came out on top. But like those aren't the games we want to see anymore. And because again, those aren't the types of games teams play who are legitimate contenders.
Yeah,
and like
no,
they have to look in the mirror. Like if this team wants to change, I mean, it's easy to say like, yeah, look in the mirror and change, but they have to look in the mirror and change. They have to dial in. And that game against the Sens, like again, it was so typical of the Toronto Maple Leafs in the way that they came off that win against Montreal. So they have days to rest. Ottawa hasn't played a game since last March. There again, like you said, everyone thinks they're going to finish last in division. Could it have been more typical in the way that the Leafs went into that game, and from the way they were playing, it looked like they were just listening to too many podcasts telling them how good they are? Like that game was an absolute embarrassment. The Leafs looked like they were playing an exhibition game. And I know, like, again, it's weird playing in the empty arenas and this and that. And again, you're playing a weaker opponent coming off a win, but that was bad. Like that was one of the worst performances I've seen, I think, in the Matthews era. Because it wasn't one of those losses where, again, if they would have outshot Ottawa by 20 shots and the goalie stands on his head, like people, it's not just a loss to the Senators. You can lose to a quote unquote bad team in the NHL and have a good performance, but that was a bad performance. Like Brody was bad. And I mean, they pointed to it and Keefe pointed to it in his post game. Like I thought Nylander was bad in that game. There was one play, it was weird. I don't know if you noticed it. I think this kind of summed up the Leafs mindset going to this game. Matthews and Marner had a 2-on-1 down low really quick. And here you sit up in your seat because you're expecting Matthews to fire it. And he just kind of fed it over to Marner. And then Marner did like the one knee thing. He tried to go far side top corner. He missed the net. And it was one of those ones where it almost felt like it looked like pickup hockey in the way that Matthews almost passed it because he felt obligated to pass it. Whereas like in a real game, you would have shot it. And then Marner just tried to be cute again. And it was like, guys, no, like, dial in. It just I thought that game was really, really bad. Really bad. Again, what were the shots in that game? They were I think we only had like 24 shots.
Yeah, the
like,
shots
against an Ottawa team that hasn't played in a year. Like,
yeah,
man.
I think the shots were like more or less even in that game. I mean, it wasn't like game 3 where the Leafs outshot them by it was like 20 or something like that.
Yeah, it was like 40-19 or something.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about Marner. I have not been impressed with him early in the season. Now, I will say with Matthews, I think he's generating scoring chances, a ton of shot attempts. He to me looks like typical Austin Matthews. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe he wasn't fantastic in all 3 games, but I have no problem with the way he's been playing. But with Mitch Marner, those first 2 games in particular, he was almost a ghost out there.
Yeah.
And I didn't like what I was seeing from the chemistry of that line. And that's something we'll get into later in the podcast. But Lepore, speaking of the new additions to this team, and you brought up TJ Brody. I mean, obviously Joe Thornton and Wayne Simmons, Jimmy Vesey. Have you been pleased with the way that any of these guys have played so far? Do you think any of them have elevated this team in any way so far this season?
My quick answer is no. I mean, because again, like what we've seen in these first 3 games, they look like the Maple Leafs of last year. I mean, Simmonds got in that fight, and we can talk all day long about if that pumped up the team into getting motivated into a comeback. I mean, I guess VC again, that we talked last week about how like VC's kind of got nothing to lose with this team, and there's no real expectations. Like I think he's been fine. Brody had that nightmare in the second game. He looked good last night. I mean, I'll give him some time, like playing D in those types of minutes. We'll give him some time. Was it just me? And I'll ask you, like, it seemed like Keefe was giving Simmonds a lot of ice and even a lot of ice with talent. Like it was almost to the point in that second game, like the first game against the Sens, where I think Keefe quickly saw what was going on and how bad the Leafs looked. And he was like, hey, you guys aren't playing. Like almost like he was taking minutes away from the higher end players, saying, okay, no, sit your ass down. You're not playing. You guys look like trash. I don't know. Did you see that? Because it seemed like Simmonds was on a lot, like in that game.
Yeah, what I don't understand, period, to be honest with you, is just what Keefe is doing with Simmonds and Joe Thornton.
Okay.
And the amount of ice time they're getting, how they're both on the top power play unit.
Yeah, I noticed Simmonds on the power play. Yeah, 100%.
I noticed in game 2 against Ottawa, I'm not exactly sure about Simmonds' minutes, but Thornton played like 3 more minutes than John Tavares in that game.
I didn't even notice that. Are you serious?
He played, Thornton played, I believe it was like 18 minutes in that second game. And
Okay.
Tavares played, it was like 15 and a half or something like that.
Perfect.
And I've noticed early on, I don't understand what the mindset is here. And maybe this will take us into this top power play unit situation, how Keefe has Joe Thornton and Wayne Simmonds on the top unit with Marner, Matthews, and Morgan Rielly. And my theory behind this, Lepore, is that these are 2 veterans coming in, and I think the organization wants them to feel welcome, wants them to feel like they're contributing, wants them to feel like they matter. And from what I've seen so far, that first power play unit, they finally scored for the first time Saturday night against the Senators. That was the first goal that unit actually scored. To me, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because when you have Tavares and Nylander on that top unit with Marner, Matthews, and Rielly, they're essentially the best power play unit in the league. So what the hell are the Leafs doing here, continuing with this top power play unit?
Yeah, I think they actually were the top power play in the league when it came to generate, maybe not by goals or percentages, but by generating scoring chances. Yeah, no, it's weird, man. Like these combinations, and like talking to hockey people, me not being one of them, talking to some high-end hockey people I know, they say one of the biggest flaws a lot of these young modern coaches have is overcoaching, overthinking things. And like that's the vibe I've been getting from these first 3 games, in the way of trying out these weird line combinations. Like if I remember correctly, there was a goal to Sens scored in that second period where the Leafs had Matthews, Simmonds, and Spezza on at the same time. Like, what is that? Like why are those 3 guys on the same line together? And of course they got scored on, of course. And back to not overthinking it, you mentioned like the power play. Okay, so this power play was elite with those 5 guys on because they're the best players. Don't overthink it. Put the talented guys out there who can score. That's it. And keep them out there for a minute and a half. Who cares? Like again, it's not about being cute. And like you mentioned before about like, trying to make these guys feel welcome. No, we're not. This organization shouldn't be about making guys feeling welcome. We should run like a corporation. It's black and white. It's about the best players being on in the situation where they're paid to score. The best players have to be the best players. And if you want to get in that category of best players, you have to be one of the best players. So if you're not, you're not going to be. And that's where my frustration lied in the first 3 games, is that I didn't see that intensity again. And now we're going full circle again, but it came from Keefe too, man. Like I'm a little like, a lot's on Keefe. I think we've kind of given him that leeway because he came through the Marlies and the situation with Babcock last year. But man, you're given an elite team. Like results have to be there. And I'm not saying, oh, this guy's going to get fired, or he's on the hot seat. It's not even close to that. But no, like we want to see results. And especially in this division, like this year, the Leafs have been given a runway, man. Like this is an advantage to us. We touched about it last week. So just keep it simple and win. Like, yeah, again, it sounds so overly simplistic, but it all comes into play talking about the power play and the line combinations. When you have the best team or the better team, play the best players, play them in those situations. Don't overcoach. I don't know. What's your assessment of Keefe?
Yeah, and listen, I'm a big Sheldon Keefe guy. In the last episode, I went over all the numbers in terms of how much they improved once he took over from Babcock last season. And I still think it's early. Obviously, we're 3 games in, and I'm still willing to give Keefe the benefit of the doubt here.
100%.
But there are things that are concerning me.
That's the right word, concerning.
And it's like I said about this top power play unit. And, even the first line having Thornton play with Marner and Matthews, there are things that just do not make sense. And this is something that I always got frustrated with Mike Babcock, right? It's do the obvious goddamn thing. Yeah. Play Austin Matthews 20 plus minutes a game. Play your best players 19 to 20 plus minutes a game.
Yeah.
It comes down to that, right? So going back to this whole power play situation, it's funny because when the Leafs had their first 5-on-3, who were the guys that went out on the power play? It was the actual 5 best players, the actual top power play unit, and they scored immediately.
And they scored. Yeah. Oh, Marner and Tavares, they scored.
So now are we only waiting until the Leafs have a 2-man advantage for that unit to go out on the ice? Like, how long is this going to continue where we're going to have to see Wayne Simmonds and Joe Thornton out there? And listen, the Leafs are still probably going to produce and score goals. Like I said, they finally scored a power play goal with that unit on the ice in game 3 against the Senators. But it just gets to a point where you have so much talent. Stop trying to galaxy brain the situation here. Play your best players. Put the guys out on the power play who deserve to be out there. And this team is going to win some games. And again, going full circle, like you've been saying, Lepore, we need to see that killer instinct at one point. And I like that you brought up that 8-0 Avalanche win.
Yeah.
Because the Avalanche come out in their first game. They lose 4-1. They don't look great. Everyone has them as the favorite to win the Stanley Cup. And then they just absolutely demolish.
They smash them. Like, I watched that game. They
Obliterate St. Louis in game 2. Just embarrass them. And I'm not saying the Leafs have to go out there and beat Ottawa 8-0.
But I want them to. That's the thing. With the performance they had in the first game against Ottawa, that's what I wanted to see in the next game. Mm-hmm. It's like, let's throw that. Show us you're throwing that game in the trash, and they didn't do it. They played conservative, and you could tell they were a little more dialed in, attention to detail. But no, I wanted them to smash them. And it's easy for me to say, oh, I want my team to smash the other team, but I wanted that smash type of performance, and we didn't get it. And again, that's what's annoying, man. And that's what's concerning.
And saying all that, Lepore, we've been pretty hard on this team so far. Is there anything that you've liked from this team over the first 3 games?
Not really. Again, because the thing, okay, what would I say? I like, they create chances, they can score. Like, everything I would point to and say I like are things I already knew about this team. And they're things we've seen from this team in the last few years. So really, at the end of the day, I'm exactly in the same spot of this team being where they were, in the way that they're fun to watch. Every game's a nail biter, but the negatives, there's too many negatives still there. And then I'm in full show me mode with this team. So if there's anything directly, I mean, maybe nothing just coming to my head now, but that I really and truly liked, no, really. Like, I'm seeing the same flaws over and over again. Why? Did anything jump out to you?
Nothing specifically has jumped out to me. Again, we know what this team is, right? So I'm not surprised at all with the way that they're able to control the pace of the game. But one thing I will say that I have noticed, despite, his blunders in game 2, is TJ Brody. And okay. I actually really like the way that he's played in games 1 and 3.
Okay.
And even at certain points in game 2, I know he had a couple giveaways and he just didn't look good. But, and going back to the Cody Ceci conversation we had in the last podcast, there were just too many times where you essentially had an AHL defenseman out there with Morgan Rielly. And just the way that I'm watching Brody move the puck out of the zone, making quick, smart decisions, being efficient. He's actually been decent also running the second power play unit. And I really think that it's solidified our blue line. And again, the Leafs have still had some defensive breakdowns, things they got to clean up. But I would say of all the new guys that have come in, I've actually really liked the way that TJ Brody's been playing for the most part.
Yeah.
If we kind of throw out some of those terrible moments in game 2.
Yeah, the game 2, game 2, I'm willing to throw in the trash. Like that was an absolute nightmare, and the team was bad all around. What have your thoughts been on Bogosian?
Okay, so the first game, I thought Bogosian was a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
I thought he was terrible. He took a couple bad penalties. He just looked choppy out there.
Yep.
It just didn't look like he was smooth. He wasn't playing with confidence. And again, it was the first game of the season against Montreal. I'm willing to give the dude the benefit of the doubt, coming off a Stanley Cup championship with Tampa Bay. But I was ready to just put Mikko Lehtinen in the lineup immediately after watching
show us Lehtinen now. Like that was my reaction.
Yeah. So Bogosian to me, and you know what, he settled down a little bit. Now he hasn't really been getting a lot of ice time, which is great considering the way that he's looked so far. But yeah, I mean, he's only playing 12 to 14 minutes a game essentially, and I do like the way that he bounced back in games 2 and 3. Now, when I say that, it means that I didn't really notice him. And that's what I want from especially the Leafs bottom pair,
right?
Dermott and Bogosian, or whoever else ends up, coming into the lineup at some point, if Bogosian or Dermott are scratches later in the season. I don't want to notice them.
Yeah.
Just come out and do your job, because once you start giving the puck away, making stupid decisions, taking dumb penalties, that's when, fans go, oh my God, Zach Bogosian, this is terrible. Oh my God, Travis Dermott, what the hell is he doing?
Yeah.
I want that bottom pair on defense to come out and just play a solid game and don't make dumb mistakes and stupid decisions. That's all I want from the bottom pair. And it's gotten a little bit better, especially looking at game 3, but that's been my assessment so far with this blue line. What do you think, Lepore?
Actually, back to the topic of things that maybe were positive in these first few games. I thought Justin Holt looked pretty good. Like pretty confident rushing the puck, distributing the puck, guiding play in his own zone, not overcommitting. Like just kind of like how we touched on last week, like just be fine. Like hammering home that point, just be fine. So I'll give Justin Holt a high five based on the first 3 games of the season. But no, like I'm with you when it comes to Bogosian. Like, man, he looked bad. Like he looked just old and bad. And like that panic you get when you see your defenseman reaching, like either reaching with his hand or reaching for a stick and he's not moving his feet. We saw a lot of that from Bogosian. You mentioned again the penalties he took. Like for this team to be successful, like he's got to be at the bottom of that defensive group. Another guy I thought looked pretty good, and he got a lot of buzz on Twitter, was away from the defense is Kerfoot. Like I saw like a few moments of brilliance, a lot of speed entering the zone, a lot of solid zone entries, like creating chances here and there. He did get that goal where he picked the corner. I mean, what were your thoughts on him?
Yeah, Kerfoot to me looks really fast. He looks like the Kerfoot I thought the Leafs were getting last season.
Yeah, he looked in the bubble. Like he there was a lot of improvements in in the 5 games in the bubble, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing really good flashes from him. He's quick. He's good in the offensive zone. He can be a little gritty too. He's not afraid to mix it up in the corners and things like that. And I'm not saying he's going into the corners and running dudes over, but I just like, how his ability to win puck battles. And it kind of reminds me, another guy who I thought has played pretty well is Zach Hyman.
Oh, Hyman's been awesome, man.
Hyman's been great. And he's a guy, and again, going back to episode 1 of this podcast where we were talking a little bit about Zach Hyman, I was never really a fan of him early on in his Leafs tenure, but he has grown on me year after year after year. And to me, I will be absolutely stunned if he is not back on that top line at some point with Matthews and Marner.
Me too.
Because
seems like a no-brainer.
Because game in and game out, just the consistency from Zach Hyman, the compete level, and I hate to use those buzzwords, right?
Where's the compete? Yeah.
But he plays so hard and he's so tenacious, and you just know what you're getting from him.
Exactly.
Because there's some dudes on this team where it's like, going back to how we talked about Marner earlier, I thought he was essentially invisible the first 2 games. And yeah, he made a couple nice passes here and there, but for the most part, I thought Matthews was totally carrying that line. Yeah. But with Zach Hyman, even though you're not getting the same offensive ability of a Mitch Marner or Austin Matthews or the top guys, you just know what he's going to bring you on a game in, game out basis. And I think that's so important for this team. So that's a guy who I would like to see continue to just get more opportunities on this team. So yeah, I mean, you nailed it with Kerfoot. I think Hyman's played well. Morgan Rielly, I got a man crush on Morgan Rielly. I've loved the way he's played.
Yeah, he's involved, man.
Flying all over the ice, just making things happen. What's been your assessment actually of Morgan Rielly so far?
Rielly's been what I expected. Like he's just consistently very good. Again, like whether we're gonna put him in that category of Norris Trophy candidate, but like what more can you ask for? And like something that doesn't get talked about enough is his salary. Like like those Dom Lucian and those guys like do those metrics on who are the highest value guys in the NHL based on their performance. He's got to be one of the best contracts in the league in terms of contribution. Like, man, I don't know what this team would do without Morgan Rielly. Like that's a topic on its own. We can talk for 3 hours about that. What would this team do without him playing those minutes? And that thing too, like we think guys are bad. So imagine Rielly wasn't Rielly and all these guys were given more responsibility. Like this team would be in a lot of trouble. Like I don't even know what this team would do. And again, with that contract. So that we talk about these guys we have at the top, like the Matthews, the Marners, Nylanders, Tavares, and having them locked into their deals and a timeline. And I hate talking about windows, but this window gets circled of this team and when they can achieve success. We might look back to when Morgan Rielly leaves or when he gets re-signed for whatever he's going to be worth and say that was our window, having Morgan Rielly at his current salary, because his performance is like, just again, consistently good. The way he rushes the puck, the way he holds the puck, the way he sends the puck up the ice to the forwards. He's an asset all the time, every game. And again, back to the thing that's most impressive about him is that you can always rely on him. And that's it. And
you nailed it with Rielly, and especially with his contract situation, because that dude is going to get paid.
Oh man,
he's going to get paid large. And I think that's going to create even more headaches for this Leafs team.
I'm surprised it's not getting talked about more, man. Like that's a topic. In terms of the
salary cap situation. And it's like you said, you take Morgan Rielly off this blue line. I mean, it's a disaster because there is not a single player on this Leafs blue line who can play the role that he plays.
Right.
Now, I'm still very optimistic about Mikko Lehtinen, even though we haven't seen him yet. And I think he has a lot.
You like Lehtinen, right, Bruno?
Oh, I'm the captain of the Mikko Lehtinen fan club, even though he hasn't played a single.
He hasn't played a game yet.
He hasn't played a single second
Leafs
for
Nation.
the Maple Leafs. Yeah.
Hashtag Leafs Nation. Bruno's got the jersey hanging on the wall. He hasn't played a game yet.
Oh man, but I mean that's one guy that maybe comes to mind who can do the same things in terms of play in the same situations, run the top power play. But for example, I can't see TJ Brody doing the things Rielly does. Jake Muzzin can't do that. Justin Hall can't do that. They're all essentially knockoffs offensively of what Morgan Rielly can provide this team.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's going to be one hell of a situation once he becomes an unrestricted free agent. I mean, who knows if it gets to that point, maybe they re-sign him before he tests the open market. Who knows how that's going to play out, but
I don't know. I actually thought, and this is a whole separate discussion, but I thought the world was going to be shocked and I thought Rielly was going to be named captain. Like that whole discussion. I mean, people were debating Tavares versus Matthews. I thought, man, I'm like, it's going to be Rielly. I just kind of thought it'd be that safe thing, but I don't know. Like I was wrong. And I don't think anyone would have had a problem with Morgan Rielly being captain. Again, we touched on it last week. The guy's been with this organization for a while. He's been through some bullshit. I don't know. I mean, again, I was wrong and it's a moot point now, but I was hoping / thinking he was going to be captain.
I like this. Let's stick on this captain conversation for a second because I thought it was very interesting. And again, I mean, this is in the past, but it also affects this team moving forward. And I think we should talk about it. Um, I wasn't too surprised that they named Tavares the captain. And I think that Babcock probably had a big say in that.
Okay.
But I do think that Morgan Rielly to a certain extent was pissed off about this because
Really?
he's been here through thick and thin. He's essentially the longest tenured Leaf at this point. And one thing I love about him is he's very vocal, whereas Tavares is more of a, he just kind of goes about his business. He's not really a vocal leader. And again, like Sundin wasn't a vocal leader, and we both love Matt Sundin. Yeah. But I there you go, right? Look on the wall behind Lepore for those watching on YouTube. I mean, damn, we could talk for days about Captain Mats, but yeah, I think Morgan Rielly really wanted to be the captain of this team. And the more that I kind of watch this team play and the more that I think about it and I see Morgan Rielly, talk to the media post game, the more I think, oh my God, this guy should have been the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
So
I was weird. I was weird on it because like Tavares was the safe choice. Let's call a spade. Like if it would have been Matthews, people would have said, "Oh, maybe he's too young." There was that whole incident in the off season that I don't want to talk about.
Yeah, Captain Underpants.
Oh God, brutal. So there was that whole incident. So maybe if that played a role in it, because I remember Chris Johnson said a month or two before that Matthews was going to be captain. Like he was on. I was listening to him on a podcast, and he said Austin Matthews will be the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then John Tavares was named captain, and you're left to think maybe that whole incident affected it. But again, he was the safe choice. And I'll get your opinion on this. There was part of me that thought, and not even necessarily directly to do with the FNUF thing, but is it a bad idea for the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs to be a defenseman? Just based on the added pressure of, you get beat. Like I'll put it this way: that goal McDavid scored last year when he just walked Rielly.
I was in the building for that goal.
Oh, were you?
Oh my God, that was one of the dirtiest goals I've ever seen.
Oh, it was ridiculous. It was one of those plays where the move itself wasn't really anything special. Like it wasn't like a spinorama, puck between the legs, top shelf move, but it was just something that was so simple for McDavid, which makes it so scary. But anyways, it's just one of those things where Rielly gets walked like that, or the team's had defensive problems, they're getting lit up. It sucks for him to have to answer the questions every time in the locker room, just being the defenseman. And maybe I'm just totally out of left field on this one and completely wrong. But I just think there's, in a market like Toronto, there's more pressure on a D-man to be captain, where if it's a center, if it's a forward, I mean, oh, you're not producing. I mean, well, you're not producing, whatever. There's gonna be spells where you're not producing.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from, especially with the narrative around this team.
How that's the right word. The narratives that would have been created
below average for let's say the last decade, really, right? I mean, it's felt like longer than that, but yeah, I mean, I can see that a little bit. And it's like you said, Tavares was the safe choice, right? The dude captained the Islanders for I don't know how 6-7 years, something around there. He's experienced. He's older.
He's an adult.
The guy has a wife and a kid, and he's just he's further along in life, let's say, right? It just seemed like, a perfect guy to name captain for this organization. Whereas you look at Matthews, it's like you said, he's a little bit young and immature. And, Marner, I don't really see having the captain qualities. But yeah, I mean, I think that might be a conversation that comes up depending on how this team plays. And again, whoever the captain of this team isn't really a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but it is something interesting to look back on and talk about as we continue to watch this team moving forward.
Yeah.
Now, Lepore, looking at some of the other teams in the Canadian division so far, specifically the teams that the Leafs have played.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts on the Montreal Canadiens, because coming into the season, I wasn't totally convinced with some of the offseason moves they've made. And if you speak to Habs fans, it's as if they picked up, Crosby and Malkin in the offseason, and this team is ready to go win a Stanley Cup. But what are some of your thoughts on the way that the Habs have looked so far?
I say this as a full-on compliment to the Montreal Canadiens. That team is fucking annoying. Watching that game against Toronto, they just wouldn't go away. And every time a Toronto player had the puck, they were all over them. Of course, they got Carey Price. We can talk all day about how good Carey Price is, but that team is a well-balanced team. And I'm with you. Like, I think people were using a lot of recency bias, looking at what they did in the bubble and forgetting that team, were they 24th last year in the regular season?
They got so lucky to make the playoffs.
Yeah, they were one of the last teams to get in, but I was pointing to that. But I mean, obviously Andersen, I mean, that deal, we can talk a lot about the term of it, but he's looked good so far. Suzuki is sick. Like, Suzuki's an awesome player. And they have a lot of guys who are just good enough to get in the way and produce. And again, almost very different than the Leafs in the sense that they are well balanced and they can beat you in a lot of different ways, where you know how Toronto's going to beat you. Toronto's going to beat you with the big boys scoring. But I will say it, man, from a playoff perspective, I'm scared shitless of the Montreal Canadiens. Like a 7-game series with the Leafs right now, like, I'd put that as a coin flip. Of course, the Leafs have more talent and more big names, but the balance in that lineup, the way they play, I think Julian's a good coach, and bet against Carey Price, be my guest. So I got to say, so far, so good for the Montreal Canadiens. They hammered Edmonton last night too. So I don't know. Montreal's here, man. They're here, and they need everyone in the Canadian division should be made aware of the Habs. That's my opinion anyway. What do you think?
Yeah, in terms of the Habs, I do like the way they played, especially in game 1 against the Leafs. You know, looking at how the Leafs played against the Senators, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, that I thought the Leafs controlled most of the play. And it sort of reminded me of the Leafs in the bubble against the Blue Jackets, where I thought throughout that series, even though the Leafs lost, they controlled most of the play, but the Blue Jackets obviously won the series. Whereas that Habs game, they traded a lot of chances with Toronto. Mm-hmm. And despite not having the same talent level, you know, there were moments in that game, it was back and forth. Both teams were getting quality scoring chances.
Yeah, Montreal plays fast.
They play really fast. They play hard. And it's like you said, Julian's a great coach. And they got Carey Price, who I will take over Frederik Andersen and Jack Campbell any day of the week.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's terrifying, especially in a 7-game playoff series. And I like their defense core as well. Shea Weber, Jeff Petrie, the kid Alexander Romanov. They got a pretty nice defense core. They picked up Joel Edmondson. I mean, he's nothing special, but that's a team that has solid depth, and they're well coached. They got great goaltending. So they're going to be a problem throughout the season. Now, where I did see there was a glaring difference between the two teams, and you could disagree if you want, was in overtime, where I think in overtime, the Leafs skill level it just jumps off the screen, because no matter who they're putting out on the ice, whether it's the pair of Tavares and Nylander, Matthews and Marner, I mean, Rielly's out there essentially like a forward. And that's exactly where I think Montreal sort of gets exposed for their lack of high-end talent and game breakers. And it's like you said, Nick Suzuki, I think, is really good. And at some point, you know, could become, I mean, you could argue right now he's their best player, but he could elevate into that tier where he's talked about as one of the top centers, you know, in the conference, let's say, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that team is there yet, but I really like the way they play, and I like their depth. And it's like you said, Lepore, that's a team I think everyone in the Canadian division should be scared of, especially if you have to play them in a 7-game playoff series.
Yeah. Like, and you mentioned the point though, about the overtime and them. I guess they don't really have, like, who'd be their best skating puck moving defenseman? Would it be Petrie? Like a guy who can join the rush, maybe pop in a goal, like distribute to the forwards.
It's essentially Petrie, and they're really high on Romanov as well, who looks like he's pretty smooth. But yeah, I mean, defensive, and because like Shea Weber's not that guy. Like, sure, he's great on the power play with a booming shot, but in terms of 3-on-3 overtime, he's not that dude. But no, I mean, it's like you said, the Habs, they're gonna be something to deal with all season long. They're annoying. They play hard. They're a pain in the ass. So we know what that team's about. Lepore, shifting over now to the Senators.
Yeah.
Okay? And I said this off the top of the show. I still think they're going to finish dead last in the division. You know, I love some of the offseason moves they've made, and I like the direction this team is heading in. But what are your assessments of the Senators so far? Living, of course, in Ottawa, Michael Lepore.
Like I said last week, behind enemy lines. The thing that jumped out to me about the Sens is you look at the guys in their lineup. You look at Tkachuk. You look at Shabbat. They brought in Stützle, who's incredible. Like, what a goal that was last night. But just watching their body language and the way they play, they love to play hockey. These guys are having an absolute blast out there every time they're on the ice. And I think that's something that's underappreciated in the modern NHL. And that's a good sign for the Sens and their fans, man. Just having these guys that have enthusiasm and just love to play. And you hear all the time about these guys in the NHL. A lot of them don't necessarily love hockey. They just happen to be really, really good at it. They've been playing since they're kids and they have athletic ability and they're sort of physical geniuses and they can put the puck in the top corner. And then there's the other kids who they just love the sport. And a lot of GMs and coaches who I've heard in interviews say that comes into play with the interviews at the draft. Like, some people kind of look past those interviews and don't really pay too much attention to them. But for some GMs and coaches, they're at the height of importance, because when they talk to these kids, they get a sense of how much they actually love the sport of hockey and how much they commit to it. Because with that too, I think it kind of goes hand in hand in the way of a commitment to winning. So like I see these guys in their enthusiasm on the ice. And again, it's in their body language. I think it's almost impossible to miss. Like Tkachuk, that kid on every play, like he's chirping, but then he's got the smile on his face. He's lively on the bench. When he loves to score, like that celebration he does. That tip was crazy, by the way. Like the guy on the call, I forget who did the call in that game, the color guy, but he was kind of criticizing Brody for not tying up Tkachuk's stick. I was like, nah, I don't know. That was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, that was an insane tip.
Yeah, I don't know what Brody was really supposed to do on that one. But I think it's a good signs for Sens fans. And with regard to those young kids and their enthusiasm and their jump and what appears to be a great commitment to being elite players, it's good sign. That's all fun and good and great. Yeah. What do you think about my hometown Sens?
No, and like you said, I think the first guy I thought about when you described your assessment of that team is Brady Tkachuk. Yeah. I mean, that dude is just everywhere.
Brady Tkachuk is exactly what the Toronto Maple Leafs need.
Oh my God. He's throwing hits.
And it's easy to say that about a great player, but everyone knows what I mean by that.
Oh,
yeah.
He's just that's a dude that you would just absolutely love to have on your team. He's constantly chirping. He's constantly throwing his body around. He's getting in the corners. He's getting in front of the net. He's pissing people off. He's a good offensive player.
Yeah.
I mean, I just love everything about that kid. And then another kid who I'm slowly falling in love with is Tim Stützle.
It's crazy.
Oh my God. And I don't want to say that the LA Kings made a terrible mistake passing on him at number 2 with, they took Quinton Byfield.
Yeah,
but
the
based
early
on
signs, yeah.
what I've seen so far, just looking at them in the World Juniors and seeing how good Stützle is, over the first couple of games where, he's not even really playing that much, right? He's playing like 14, 15 minutes a night. This kid to me, and again, I don't want to jump the gun. He looks like he's going to be a very, very good NHL player for a long time.
I think there might be an argument by season's end that he should win first overall. Because again, he just turned 19. So, man, and again, like you mentioned the point about the World Juniors. I mentioned during that tournament, imagine he played for Canada. Imagine he was put into that lineup and given that type of support, the types of numbers he would have put up.
Oh, man.
Like he's playing for Germany.
He would have been the best player on Team Canada. There's
no question about it.
I heard a stat actually during the broadcast that of the 15 goals that Germany scored in the World Juniors, Tim Stützle was in on 14 of those goals.
Are you serious?
Something absurd like that, or sorry, that he was on the ice, I believe, for 14 of the goals. So not exactly, he wasn't on the score sheet for all those goals, but he was on the ice. And just watching him play, and it's like you said, going back to just the enthusiasm, you could just tell he loves being out there, and he just wants to dominate.
Awesome.
And he looks so good, and just the way, like, he looks strong, and I think that just comes from playing. Like, he's played with men, right? That's another thing that sometimes we forget about some of these guys coming over from Europe.
Yeah, German elite league, right?
Like, he's already played professional hockey with grown men. And I think it shows, because he's come in right away and he's contributed and he looks great. And that's a player that, if I'm a Senators fan, man, giddy up.
That's a jersey I'm buying. Yeah, if I'm a Senators fan. I'm a jersey snob, by the way, everyone.
You have that guy in your top six, with some of the other talent they have with Brady Tkachuk, and even guys like Josh Norris and Drake Batherson.
Yeah, Batherson's look good.
The American League last season.
Yeah, he's looked really good.
And then Thomas Chabot, who I think is incredible on the back end. And that's a nice team moving forward. So yeah, I think the Senators, right now, no, I don't think they're really going to do anything this year in the North Division. Yeah, sure, maybe they're going to pull off some surprise wins, like the 5-3 win over Toronto, but
yeah,
I don't really see that team, finishing higher than 6th or 7th in the division. So
yeah,
that's the way I look at it. Lepore, going back to the Leafs for a second, okay? This has been a big topic of conversation on social media. It's with Joe Thornton.
Yeah.
Okay. We've gone over this. He's 41 years old. He's playing 16 and a half minutes per game through the first 3 games. Lepore, the last 2 seasons in San Jose, he played 15 and a half minutes per game. So his ice time has raised a minute per game with the Leafs so far. He's on the first power play unit. He's on the top line with Matthews and Marner. What's going on here, Lepore?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't I just don't get it. Like I mentioned before about like me not being like a quote unquote hockey guy, like hockey man, as they say. But when I think of a line, and we touched on this last week, I'd like to think and hope that when you have a line of 3 guys, there's something that each guy on the line can do better than the other 2. And when I look at a line that has Marner, Thornton, and Austin Matthews, what does Thornton do better than Matthews and Marner? I don't know. Like you touched on Hyman before. You put Hyman on that line. We know exactly what Hyman's role is on that line. We know he's going to do the dirty work. He's going to go in front of the net. He's going to be an energy guy. With Thornton, I put my hands up in the air and I'm just like, I don't know. And again, like I can't see it lasting. I can't, but I mean, weird things happen with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like you mentioned before that you don't see it, but do you have any perspective on what they're trying to accomplish with that? Like, do you think in Sheldon Keefe's brain, he thinks this is a thing?
I can't see this lasting at all. And I don't understand Keefe's mindset continuing to do this. And I know we're only 3 games into the season, but I would like to believe, okay, in terms of everything that Sheldon Keefe has accomplished in his coaching career, he's a smart guy. He's won everywhere he's been.
Yeah.
I can't possibly see him thinking that this is going to work long term, because listen, I don't want people to get all pissed off, because I know Thornton scored in the Leafs 3-2 win over the Senators. It was a nice drop pass from Marner. That was great. They were smiling. Everything looked great. But that chemistry is still off to me. And maybe because it's the lack of training camp and preseason games, but I'm watching Thornton out there and I'm just seeing some of the little plays they're making in the offensive zone, Lepore, and they're just not on the same page.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big reason why that line, they had, Matthews and Marner had 1 assist in the first 2 games each. That was it. And I know they broke out in game 3 and things were good, but I'm not seeing the chemistry with that line, and I'm not seeing how Thornton is working into that equation. I just don't see it, because listen, Thornton still has the IQ and he still has the playmaking ability and he could still contribute. But to me, like, for example, I look at a guy like Jason Spezza. I'm sorry, tell me if I'm wrong, but what can Spezza do better than Joe Thornton? And I'm not saying that Spezza should be on the first line, but why is Thornton there? Thornton should be in a bottom six role.
Yeah.
Like, enough with the shenanigans. And sure, maybe the chemistry is going to get better as the season goes on here, but I think that this should just end immediately. I think you just throw Hyman back on that top line and you call it a day, and you put Thornton in a bottom six role. I don't care who he plays with. I think that would be a lot better for this Leafs team moving forward.
Yeah, you touched on before the Leafs' abilities 3-on-3. So you have Marner and Matthews, who you'd throw out there, total no-brainer, would be elite 3-on-3 players. And to sum this all up, they're playing with a player who you wouldn't dare throw out there 3-on-3. Like, to me, I just look at that and like put my hands up again and say, what is the point of this? Or again, like a guy like a Hyman or a VC, that type of player, or even if they want to go full balls out and go Tavares, Marner, Matthews. Again, we'd get it. We'd understand. But with this, I don't know. I'm confused.
Yeah.
Maple Leafs fans are confused very often, but like add this one to the list.
And that's the thing. It's confusion. It's confusion because it's like you would hope that Sheldon Keefe doesn't actually think that this is working and that this is a good thing.
This would be a Babcock thing now that we're talking about it.
Yeah,
this would be like, well, he must be thinking something that none of us understand. But okay.
Yeah, this is something Mike Babcock would do, and it would cause Leafs Twitter to just lose their damn mind.
Leafs Twitter misses
Leafs Twitter
Babcock.
has lost its damn mind to a certain extent through 3 games. But yeah, if this continues, I just can't see it being. It's not optimal. And that's all it comes down to. This is not the optimal first line of this Leafs team. And yeah, I mean, I don't see it. And again, maybe it'll get better if he continues to experiment with this. But I just don't think he fits in. And I think the Leafs should probably demote him sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And
Lepore, hopefully by next episode.
What's that?
I said hopefully by next episode.
Yeah, exactly. But another thing, Lepore, that we have to get to here, and speaking of Leafs Twitter, I've seen a lot of people really mad with the play of Frederik Andersen because we've seen this in the past, especially in the playoffs where he hasn't been his best. We've seen him get off to slow starts before. He allowed 9 goals in his first 2 games, Lepore. And you mentioned it earlier in the show. He's in a contract year, the final year of a 5-year, $25 million deal. What's going on here, Lepore? Do the Leafs have the luxury of waiting for this guy to find his game when you have Jack Campbell waiting in the wings, coming off a win against the Senators? What would you do if you're the Leafs?
You mentioned Leafs Twitter. So, someone threw out a stat. I think it was last 2 seasons, 5-on-5. And Anderson's near the bottom of the league, man. Like he was like an 8-9 something among starting goalies 5-on-5, which is not good. Like just to show that this isn't something that's come into our brains in the first 3 games of the season. It's far too early to give up on Andersen, obviously, after 3 games, especially, and everyone forgets, like everyone, Jack Campbell's been solid and he's got a great personality. He's a likable guy. And we just are happy he's there because we don't have to deal with Hutchinson anymore. So it's, oh man, like we have this big man crush on Jack Campbell. But like, what has he really shown that he can carry the load? So it's that whole thing of like, well, the alternative may not necessarily be better. So on that end, I'll say that, we'll let Andersen ride this out. But the way I look at it is kind of 50-50 because again, I want this team to run like a corporation, and the Toronto Maple Leafs don't owe anything to anybody at this point. Nobody from top to bottom in this lineup has earned any right to been given leeway in that regard. So, and especially the goalie. So you show me again, like if he continues to play like this, like Campbell's going to get more starts, and he's going to get them anyway, because there's going to be a lot of back-to-backs, a lot of busy weeks. So Campbell's going to get opportunities to show his worth. And if he's out playing Andersen, it's a short season. We can't waste any time. And again, like it's a contract year. And I think we can all safely say that Andersen's not going to be back next year. So what do we have to lose? And we're not going to trade him. So That's it. Like to me, it's in the air. I'd say it's a 50-50. Like Campbell's going to get his shots, and it's up to Andersen to show us that he is rightfully the starting goalie.
I love the comment you made about this team being run like a corporation, how it should be run like a corporation, because, you know, it goes back to the conversation we've had with Thornton and the top power play unit and Wayne Simmons. No one has earned any of that.
No.
At this point, this team needs to play its best players. This team, with the exception of Austin Matthews and maybe Morgan Rielly, no one on this team deserves anything, really. And listen, that's not saying I'm not a fan of John Tavares and William Nylander. I think they're fantastic. Okay. But going back to this Freddie Andersen conversation, I'm sorry, but if he's not playing well, and listen, last year he had the worst year of his career.
He's bad.
He had a .909 save percentage. He looked shaky all season. He was terribly inconsistent. Now, I will give him this. In that Blue Jackets series, yes, he gave up, a couple soft goals that were, pretty big goals in the grand scheme of things in that series. Oh. But if you look at his overall numbers, they were really good in that Columbus series.
Yeah, but Bruno, how much does that matter in the short series? And I'll point to that because people will point to his numbers. And that was similar to like those Bruins series in the way that people would say, oh, like his numbers are okay. But if you let in one bad goal, I don't care.
Yeah.
So, hey, sorry to cut you off there.
No. I mean, you make a good point. Like at the end of the day, and even Andersen said this himself, he's like, there's such a fine line. He said this, I think, after the 5-3 loss to the Sens, where he's like, there's such a fine line from having a good game as a goalie and a bad game. And it's so true. And listen, I don't care what team is playing in front of you. You can't be allowing 9 goals in 2 games. Yeah. That's just unacceptable. He needs to be better. Being in a contract year, you would hope he's going to be better. Now, here's what I will say about Frederik Andersen. At his best, he's really good. And there's been stretches where Andersen, more or less has carried this Leafs team over the last 4 years.
But it seems like it's been a while. Like for me, it's weird. I almost feel like Andersen was better when our defense was worse. Like in the Ron Hainsey days, where the days when it seemed like Andersen was the man. But then we made slow progressions forward defensively, and he's gotten worse. Like, have you seen that?
I think it's more maybe of a recency bias thing, just looking at what he did last season. Because again, last season he was bad. And I think maybe it has something to do with the style they're playing now under Keefe. How, one thing I've noticed with Sheldon Keefe is that he loves when the defensemen, go into the play and contribute offensively and maybe take some chances and be a little bit more aggressive. And that's going to hurt your goaltending, right? Because you're going to give up odd man rushes. Right. You're going to give up, even the Leafs, I'm sure you've noticed the same thing. They still give up chances shorthanded. That's something that this team has done over the last couple of years, right? But there's something going on with Freddie Andersen, and I don't know if it's the style of play in front of him since Sheldon Keefe took over, but he just doesn't look sharp. Yeah. And I think that, like you said, being in a shortened season and with the back-to-backs, we know that Campbell is going to get more starts just naturally. I mean, it's going to happen across the National Hockey League, where you better have a competent number 2 goalie in a season like this. And guess what, Lepore? If Campbell starts stringing together some wins and he's clearly the more competent goalie and he gets in a groove, then I think the Leafs are going to have no choice in a season like this but to ride the hot hand. I mean, it's just as simple as that.
It's an opportunity. They can't waste this opportunity.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's like with 56 games and with the expectations on this team, there's no screwing around. Just play your best players, play your best goaltender, and go and win some damn games. And saying all that, Lepore, before we wrap anything up here, some last thoughts from you on what you've seen from this team and what you're hoping to see in week 2 of the season.
Well, what we've seen so far is that the Toronto Maple Leafs are, in fact, the Toronto Maple Leafs in the way that they cause us to go gray and stress us out. But hey, again, the podcast is called Gluttons For Punishment. So they're must-see TV, that's for sure, both in the way of watching the games themselves and the talking points. But again, you asked me to sum it up. We just want to see consistency. We want to see solid play. I'm looking forward to seeing Lettinen. And it's kind of weird in an odd way. I'd like less things to talk about on this podcast, because if they're meeting expectations and playing well and Freddie's making stops and the big guys are scoring, there's not a lot of talking points. But again, the Toronto Maple Leafs being the Toronto Maple Leafs, there's talking points so far. So what are you hoping to see in the next 2 games? Who do they have next? They have Winnipeg, and then is it Calgary?
Yeah, so week 2, there's 4 games, three at home. They got Winnipeg, and then a back-to-back against the Oilers.
Right, the Oilers.
And then they head to Calgary on Sunday.
Okay.
So it should be an interesting week playing, 3 new teams. That'll be good to check out the other Canadian teams. But Lepore, you nailed it. It's consistency. I want to see this team come out, and I want them to play the way that I'm expecting them. And not just me, every Leaf fan is expecting them to play based on the talent they have assembled on this roster. Yeah. Stop screwing around. Stop giving us, like the game we saw against the Senators, that 5-3 loss. And then if you do lose, bounce back with a really strong performance and prove to us that you are a Stanley Cup contender, and prove to us that you are the best team in the Canadian division. And it's as simple as that. That's all I want to see from this Leafs team. I want to see some consistency. I don't want to see the up and down roller coaster that we saw last season. There's no injuries right now, with the exception of Nick Robertson.
Yeah.
Which in the grand scheme of things isn't really a big loss for this team. I guess how they're currently constructed. But again, Lepore, be the team that we all expect you to be. And that's it.
Just be good. That's going to be the theme of this podcast, the quote of this podcast. Just be good.
Just be good, Leafs, for the love of God.
Yeah.
That is going to do it for episode 2 of the Gluttons for Punishment podcast. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk about week 2 of the Toronto Maple Leafs season. As I mentioned, they got the Jets, the Oilers twice, and then the Flames. So hopefully we're going to have lots more to talk about. So for Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno. Thank you so much. And we will see you in the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.